y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we're going to be doing a reading vlog of the full moon readathon. Alright, so you all know the drill. Before you get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what is the best book that you read if you partook in this readathon. So this one is hosted by Readathon. She's one of my favorite booktubers. Of course, I had to participate again. She did cut down this year that it's only going to be a week, meaning I am doubling up on prompts more than I probably would in the past. I always feel like I'm really overly ambitious with Jan's readathons because she reads so much and I always aspire to read that much, but it doesn't usually happen. Funny thing though, I'm actually starting on a pretty strong note, at least when it comes to my reading. When it comes to life things, yeah, I'm currently getting sick and this is not fun. I don't like this. Please excuse the fact that I sound a little nasally. My throat is killing me. It's not going great. But on that note, actually, this afternoon I worked from home, and after work, I literally have been melting into this couch, listening to the audiobook of The Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. Which also, did y'all know Anthony Horowitz is the guy that wrote those Alex Rider books? I didn't know that until I looked this series up and found it out. But so I bought this years ago, literally years ago. I am kind of letting myself mood read through this readathon a little bit. I have read kind of meh mysteries as of late, and so I'm wanting something that's actually going to scratch that itch properly, and decided to officially try this one out. But I initially had an interest in this one because it was supposed to be like a book within a book scenario. So we have the external setup of the story where we were following, I believe her name is Susan? Yes, and she is an editor for this man that writes stories very reminiscent of like Hercule Poirot. So she has just received Alan's newest manuscript, The Magpie Murders, and she is reading the story and comes to figure out that there is sort of a mystery within this book around Alan's personal life, and Susan's determined to figure out what that is. I wasn't 100% sure what the setup of that story was going to look like, but I do tend to really enjoy book within a book scenarios. It colored me a little surprised that whenever I began into this, probably the first 50% of this book is purely us reading this manuscript. There's somebody who ends up dead in the English countryside. I think it's set in like roughly the 50s, so it's got more of an old school feel, and Atticus is asked to come and investigate, and initially he can't really do so, but then there's a change of events. There's suddenly another body to investigate and is determined to try and put this together before he officially retires. I thought this was really cool. I was very excited. There's already the breakdown between Susan and then the Atticus story, but then even with that, there are like parts broken down in Atticus's book, and then obviously there are chapter breakdowns. But it's kind of interesting how it's formatted in the story. Chapter breaks will happen like this whenever we're in Atticus's story, like in the middle of the page. So that's very wonky. As much as I was enjoying that mystery and getting invested, I was starting to drag. I was officially hitting the point of like, okay, come on. Like, you have given us so much. There's such a wide cast of characters. What's going on? And we spent so long with it that I almost was forgetting the fact that this is a book in a book scenario. Around the halfway point, we switch back to Susan, and it was such a change that like I had to remind myself, yes, that's what I wanted. I feel like I don't know if I like having it broken down this way. I wanted more of a one-to-one sort of thing. Even still, I am intrigued. We're now learning more about the real life mystery that Susan is starting to investigate around the author Alan's life. It's been set up in a very interesting way that mirrors his story he has been writing, and so that's cool. Yeah, I'm feeling as though this book might be a little too long, and I don't really love the breakdown of it. I'm pretty sure this is also the start of a series, and like I don't know if I'm enjoying this enough to read like 3 more books that are set up like this. This has very much been a mixed bag so far. But this is completing the prompt of a book that is more than 400 pages, and then a book, was it like a book that involves murder or death? And then there's also an activity prompt that you can try to do for each of the characters. Obviously the goal is to try and get all 4. The activity, I believe, for that one was to take a nap, be dead to the world for a little bit. Me getting sick, yeah, I ended up taking a nap yesterday, so I've already accomplished that one. Earlier this week I was sleeping super poorly, and I think maybe that dropped my immune system, and so I caught something. So then I got a double whammy of a sore throat and being exhausted yesterday. So nap was really nice. It really hit. On the opposite side, I also have been working on my book that I have for the 2 spider prompts. So to read a creepy book and then a 8 book. Kind of gives you some free reign with that. I am reading Shiver by Junji Ito, which I have been meaning to pick up for so long. This is actually Josh's copy, and honestly, this cover is kind of terrifying to me. But Junji Ito is a horror author and artist that I've had so much interest in because he is very, very well known on booktube, and I've just yet to actually pick one of his things up. Finally doing that here because Junji Ito is 8 letters. Not only that, this will also complete a prompt for the horror bingo that I am partaking in, which is hosted by Wicked Reading. This will be for the Creepy Crawlies prompt, because obviously, big old Creepy Crawly on the front. So it's a collection of short stories, and thus far I have read 2. I've read the Used Record and then the titular Shiver. Oh wait, no, I've read 3 because I also read Fashion Model. Already I am saying I need to pick up more from this author because his art is so good. I mean, like, just this cover alone is gorgeous. I really like the style of it, but then whenever it gets more into the creepy, horrific things, the first one wasn't anything crazy, but the Shiver one, that was a different story. And then I also like the setup of the books. I think having them in this sort of a short story format works really well for me, especially seeing as how they're animated. It allows a little bit more to be added to the story that isn't done obviously in narrative. Hoping to continue reading some of this tonight. Like I said, I'm liking it. I have just started into, what's the next one called? The Hanging Blimp one. It's creepy, I will say. Yeah, I think this was the perfect book to pick up for that prompt. I have a rough idea of other books I want to read for the rest of the readathon, but honestly, I'm gonna let myself, like I said, mood read a little bit and pick up what's calling to me at the time. And then also, I feel like I actually am making pretty good progress. I'm not gonna say that too loud because the weekend is coming and who knows what I'll actually get read, especially if my sickness gets even worse. Like, I probably will lose motivation to read. If I can finish out a bunch of books early, maybe I'll make it so that I'm not doubling up on every single prompt. It's a really big maybe, but we'll see. Hello, my friends. So, it's Monday. It's been a few days since I've talked to you because, as I said, I unfortunately was feeling under the weather. So honestly, on Saturday, I slept for like 12 hours. Shout out to NyQuil. And then pretty much became one with my couch for the rest of the day. Meaning, yeah, no energy to talk to y'all. But I have actually gotten a lot of reading done. Let's dive in from the top. I officially finished out Shiver by Junji Ito, and I did really like this. Across the board, I did enjoy all of these stories, some of them obviously more than others. Like, for example, Greased. I think it may have ruined pimple popping videos for me forever, and that's really saying something. But some of the others were, even if they weren't especially memorable, like they did have some really great disturbing imagery. I really liked hearing about where he got the ideas for some of his stories with the little commentary pieces at the end. A really solid start to my Junji Ito experience. And now I really am intrigued to try out more of his stuff. I know 𝗖cie and 𝗖𝘁𝗰𝘁 get a lot of attention because those are his longer works, but he also has numerous other short story collections. So I have plenty to work with. I just need to eventually go pick some more up. So this completed both the prompts for the spider character. I feel like whatever the activity prompt was, I have done it. I just don't remember exactly what it was. We have gotten the spider prompt. Then I was finally feeling better on Sunday, and so we went over to Josh's parents and utilized their pool, so we got to relax and hang out a little bit. And I got American Sherlock on my Kobo so I could read a little bit while we were hanging out, and that was really nice. It is my nonfiction book where we were following the man who is basically known as the father of modern forensics, and it's sort of exploring how he came to be known as this person, the many different avenues he ended up utilizing in order to investigate crimes. And so every chapter is kind of a introduction to a new crime, and then we learn a little bit more about this man, Heinrich, right, and what new science he ended up utilizing in some of these monumental cases. It is interesting, but I will say it's definitely slow moving. I like the setup of the story. There's a lot of extra information being given that like I don't think is necessarily needed. I'm liking parts of it. I continued reading it today on audio, and I actually have been trucking through it pretty well. Like I said, it's very well researched. It is interesting whenever we do focus on the forensics elements, but it does just keep feeling like it's getting bogged down in all this additional minutia of the different cases that aren't nearly as interesting to me. And then when it does come to Heinrich, I feel like we're very repetitive when we learn about his personal life. It's constantly discussions around his OCPD or his issues with money. It is one of the two. We keep going back to those. So I'm kind of ready to learn something new about him. So I continued listening to the audiobook of this one today, which on that note, rounding back to the Magpie Murders, I officially finished this one out this morning. I liked this, but again, as I said before, I really feel like this fell down for me in the setup of the story, the layout of having this first half of the book be focused on the internal story and then the second half being focused on the external story before we round back to the internal story and see how these two connect. I didn't really like the setup in that way. I think it just made it really difficult for me to get invested in both of them. It took a long time for me to get invested in the external story, especially given the fact that the victim character, the more we learn about him, the more we see this guy is not a good dude. It's one of those where like nobody is really sorry he's gone. I think it was making it really difficult for me to actually get invested in what happened to him. I did not guess either mystery, I will say that. But at the same time, I don't really like the turns this took at the end. I do think they were shocking. They were surprising. It was one of those situations where I didn't feel satisfied at the end of the book because it's like, yes, that was a surprising twist and it does make sense, but I don't feel happy that we solved the case. Complicated feelings about this, but with finishing this one, this also completed the Grim Reaper character, I believe it was, and I had already taken my nap, as I mentioned, so I do know I've completed this one. I don't think I'll continue on with this series, honestly. Unfortunately, I am having very, very mediocre mysteries as of late. I need something that I can like really sink my teeth into and love, so give me some good mystery recommendations in the comments down below. Hey y'all, so we are officially closing out the full moon readathon because I have officially finished out all of the reading prompts. I'm not 100% sure on the activity prompts, if I'm being honest with you. I think I have completed 3 out of 4, maybe? So close enough. Starting at the top, I officially closed out American Sherlock, and I had this count for a interesting premise, but an ugly cover because I don't really like this cover. A book that had been on my TBR for more than a year. Did like this. I think things got a bit more interesting towards the end whenever we started to get more invested into like the hubbub forensics was creating around some of these cases and the drama that was unfolding between Heinrich and some of these other big name forensic scientists who maybe didn't really stand on a solid scientific ground as he did. Of course, there was some issues there that he was not a big fan of, but I will continue to say it's weird that the like family/personal drama was just constantly constantly around money. It never shifted away from that. Like, yeah, we learned little things here and there about Heinrich's personal life. Everything always came back to money. And I felt like she could have done a little bit more to expand upon his personal life, allow us to get to know this man a little bit deeper. I was just so tired of hearing about his money troubles and how he was chewing out his sons for spending too much, and it was too much for me in that capacity. I also do think the layout of the different cases, whilst interesting, did get too bogged down by giving us way too many details about some of these cases. If you were going to deep dive so many cases this much, maybe limit the amount of cases and then expand more on the forensics elements, really. Because I mean, that is why I was reading this book. That is what I was here for, and that's what I was wanting. So of course, those elements were really interesting, and it's very clear this is a very well-researched book. Like I said, I think the way the author put everything together for this story really was the biggest inhibitor of my enjoyment. That said, I did still learn some stuff coming from it. There were many elements of forensics testing that I didn't realize started so early, had been utilized for so long, so I was a big fan of that. It also was interesting to see how some of these forensics tests were used and nowadays are considered not acceptable or not valid, or are still utilized, but like you can't use them as the sole piece of evidence. They have to corroborate other evidence to go along with it because they're not infallible tests. So like all that, super interesting. Like I said, I do think this had some really good nuggets, especially if you have any interest in forensic science. Absolutely. I am intrigued about some of this author's other work, having looked at some of the other stuff she has written. So I do think perhaps I would try something else out by her, but I am a little bit more hesitant just because I didn't love the actual writing itself of the book. At the very least, I finally finished it. On the opposite side, have I talked to y'all since I started into Our Wives Under the Sea? I genuinely do not remember. For a slow-paced book, and then also I was gonna say a plot twist, but I don't really know if I would constitute anything that happened in this book as like a plot twist. So Magpie Murders may have to triple count here, but I decided to pick up Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This was a really popular literary horror, I guess a few years ago now, and I've still always been intrigued by it. Plus, it's on the shorter side, and I finally could get it from my library, and it was one of the very few books on my Storygraph TBR that were labeled as slow paced. So I finally read it, and I did really like it. I don't think I really liked this for the horror aspects of it. I really would have liked those to be amped up a little bit more, but the writing in this book was so good. The way we watch this relationship unfold between these two women, backtrack, I should explain. So we alternate back and forth between two women who are married, one of which went on a submarine trip and ended up being stuck there for like 6 months. She has now returned home, but obviously is going through some stuff. We alternate back and forth between the perspective of her wife, who is trying to process through these changes, and then the past timeline when the woman gets stuck down in the submarine. And the writing in this is just so wonderfully done. It is so poignant. It is so bleak, but it's gorgeous at times. And I got this grief horror feeling. Sometimes it really could just be like a grief around losing the relationship, but also like grief around losing a partner in the way of they experience something traumatic and unfortunately they just aren't the same person anymore. The changes trauma really can have on a person, which is also reinforced by the fact that Miri, I believe her name was, the wife who she also lost her mom, is kind of a slight hypochondriac that she will also pass in the same way. And so the way that was interwoven within the story as well was very, very good. And the way it kind of reinforced this grief aspect, but also had different elements to it. Just, again, the writing in this, impeccable at times. The horror aspect was creepy. I don't know if I really like how this book ended and how things came full circle in it. It's definitely one of those where I finished it and it's like, I don't know if I have 100% grasped what just happened and like what the real ramifications, but I was enthralled by these characters' story and watching everything unfold between them and their relationship and the shifts
it's gone through. The prose itself, so good. It definitely made me think of Feed Them Silence by Lee Mandello, but that one felt a lot more focused on like the loss of a relationship, whereas this one, that was an element of it, but again, very much was more around the grief of losing someone and pairing that with going through something traumatic and how that changes a person. I'm kind of going back and forth on like, would I want to get a physical copy of this and annotate it? I don't know, because I loved the writing, but like, I don't know if this really had a ton of rereadability for me, unfortunately. So I'm still waffling back and forth on like what I want to rate this book in the end. It is definitely a slow moving read. It is really, really character focused. I mean, the plot, very meandering, does not go anywhere quickly. With that, officially finished out my full moon readathon, and today is the last day, so I managed that perfectly. At the very least, got 4 books read for the 4 characters. And on that note, that is officially it for today, y'all. So thank you so much for coming to the channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the full moon emoji in the comments. I have links to all of my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me, including a Patreon down in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!